Welcome back, everybody. Chris J Snook here with another Smarter B2B weekly executive session. Today, I can't wait to reconnect with another old friend I haven't seen in probably about 5 years, and doesn't seem like that's possible. But David Firth, who's an international consultant and leadership guru called upon by major corporations from Mars to several others around the globe to really talk about not only how they communicate, but how they tell their story. And thought it very apropos given everything that's been going on, both COVID and now with the protests and everything in between, that we talked about what his concept of unconditional communication is in times of crisis and what leaders can deploy to pick up on what Natalie and I spoke about last week as it relates to deploying empathy. How do we speak? How do we tell our story? How do we create change starting with the words that we use? So before we get too far along in today's session, because I want to use most of the meat to get with David and ask him a bunch of questions and learn, let's just thank our sponsor, Emerged. Please visit emerged.com if you are interested in highly targeted, highly relevant, customized, qualified leads that fit your long sales cycle, high ROI business. If you are in digital marketing businesses, from manufacturing to logistics to B2B to supply chain, and you're looking for efficient ways in the current and future economy to generate qualified leads, check out Emerged and they'll do some free work for you. Just mentioned Decisions 2020 in these webinars. And without further ado, I am going to get out of the way here and welcome my good friend, David Firth. David, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be with you. Good to be here. 5 years. Goodness me.
Yeah, it doesn't seem possible, but last time I had the chance to share stage with you was during Fort Collins Startup Week years ago when you came and did an awesome keynote on opening day alongside of Eric from Inc. and Stacy Ferreira and several others. So Great to reconnect, and I think these times are certainly interesting, and communication has a lot to do with not only our challenges but also maybe some of the solutions that we're all hoping to see. So I thought, why not bring one of the foremost experts that I know on the topic of language and communicating and see what you had to say about this whole thing. So I guess I'll let you talk about, you've got a new book that's in the works called Unconditional Communication. Let's just start there. Talk to us about that. Weave in your background for those who may not know you, but let's just start there.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so Unconditional Communication is the book, and we can talk a bit about, what I mean by unconditional communication and its opposite, conditional communication, which I think is a source of most of the problems that we have, is our immersion in this thing called conditional communication. But I mean, the background is, that I've been working as a consultant and coach for nearly 30 years now around the world. And what I wanted to do in this book was to bring together what I thought was the very essence of what's actually going on when human beings communicate well and connect so that they can then build what they want together in terms of a preferred future, and what gets in the way. So I've tried to drill it down to the absolute essence of it. And what I realized was that so much of our communication is what I label conditional communication. And so conditional communication is, if you and I were talking, you would have this sense that the condition involved in the communication, the conversation we're having, is actually that I get to sound good, I get to look good, I get to get my message across. Yeah, that's the most important thing. That's the condition of conditional communication. Unconditional communication says, I'm not worried about me, my ego, even my message. I'm more concerned about you, your experience, and what we can then create together out of this, which is going to include some of what I've brought to the conversation, but almost certainly is going to bring what you've brought, so that we can create something powerful together.
So let's unpack that first part a little bit. So conditional communication is where I have my agenda.
Yep.
And I'm trying to communicate it in a way where you, whoever my audience is, buys into that agenda.
Yeah.
And there's nothing necessarily strategically flawed with that. I think most people, when they think about powerful communications, are thinking about, how do I get the message that I want out to the audience, and how do I make sure they receive it in a way that gets them to do whatever it is that I want them to do. Like, I think when most people think of communication, including myself, we think of, what's the positioning statement? What's the, how am I going to cause an emotional reaction to you that is favorable and in line with where I want you to perceive me.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
is that,
sounds
is
weird.
it a fine line, or is it like that's okay to have that agenda, but just not to the exclusion of the other person receiving it?
The dependency is what's at stake here and what it is that we're actually talking about. Yeah. Because, and by the way, that I absolutely recognize that is exactly how we have trained people over the years. Yeah, and that's what we have said to audiences makes a good communicator, that they have a strong story, a strong backstory, a strong emotional connection, this, that, the other. So trust this person at the front of the room. Now, in lots of situations, that's fine. But if we're talking about the sorts of things which are facing our organizations and our businesses at the moment, which is how can we truly engage and get people to bring freely their wisdom and experience and this, that, the other, or if it's in society, how can we get people to face up to and work out what they're going to do about climate change together in their town or city or community, or what they're going to do about racial injustice together. That requires a different, because there is nobody at the front of the room who can solve these problems on our behalf, no matter how good their traditional communication skills are.
Right, and I think that's the use case I was going to try and see if you'd expand on, which is maybe that's the frame. Is there's a time where being in the front of the room and kind of delivering an order or a direction, that serves, and that is what is required of us in leadership or whatever within our organization. And then there's another time where down to a man and woman and everything in between, however people identify, there is a bigger conversation. There is a permeating conflict or social contract that is either being violated or needs to be rethought altogether.
Yes.
And at that point, we can't pretend that standing in the front of the room and saying anything but I don't have the answer, but with you, I believe we could find it, is wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Ineffective at best, most likely the wrong approach altogether.
Yeah, no matter how well-intentioned the person who's at the front of the room trying to sell that message or convey that message is, because...
And I think that's fair, because I think most people could point fingers right now at a lot of leaders, including including the most powerful leader, and pick at intention, and that's kind of nebulous. We don't know, right? I don't know your intention. You don't know my intention. The only thing we can do is over time maybe unpack that or ask. But I'm of the belief that for the most part, people's intentions probably in their mind, even if not right, probably in their mind, their intention is to serve, their intention is to help, their intention is to lead, their intention is to protect. Maybe there's a lot of other things going into that, but what you're saying is that the intent in that result in that area doesn't really matter. It's not that it's unimportant, it's just that it's a distraction before we've laid that. So talk to us about how we create there's got to be a framework that you have. So let's talk about the elements of a framework, or what they are, so that people could say, well, I do have to stand in front of something.
Yes.
A Zoom, a room, something. Pretty soon. And I've got to communicate things, and I know what I'm trying to communicate, but I don't want to do it conditionally if what you're telling me is that right now I need to do it unconditionally. So how do I actually do that? How do I enact that? Or what's my checklist that I scrub against?
And in a minute we can talk through, I've got 5 elements that I always bring as the most sort of pragmatic ways of thinking about this unconditional communication. But if you don't mind, let's just unpack again. It depends on the quality of the thing that we are here to create together out of this conversation. And you're absolutely right. There is absolutely a place for somebody standing at the front of the room saying, I've got the answer. My middle son is at CU in Boulder, 1 year away from leaving to become an aero engineer. He spends most of his life looking at some guy who's got a brain the size of a planet, because he's not saying, let's talk about this function. Let's talk about this mathematical formula. He's like, trust me, this is the formula you need to know. Get it into your head and reproduce it when it comes to exam time. So in those sorts of things, absolutely, we can have that front of the room sort of thing. The others, when the audience, when your message might actually be diminishing the wisdom that's already inherent in the audience and might be tapped into for an outcome even better than the one you thought you were selling so well and speaking so well at the front of the room. Yeah, those are the dangerous things, because and again, it comes back to this whole training we've had, this whole conditioning we've had, that we've been said, a leader that has a strong point of view has got to be a good leader. And that's not always the case when we are facing the sorts of complex, wicked problems that we are facing in our world right now.
So how would somebody, let's say that we'll talk about the elements of proactively becoming an unconditional communicator as a leader.
Yeah.
But let's say that you're the recipient of, you are in the audience of someone who doesn't get it, who is standing tall and doing that, but who maybe well enough where you probably know the intent is actually pure.
Yeah.
The effectiveness is just off.
Yeah.
How would someone in the organization who maybe has the relationship of respect and mutuality either pull that person aside or what have you and say, I'd like to give you some help. I'd like to give you some constructive feedback because I know what you're trying to achieve. And I think if you do it with this framework, you'll get what you want and what they need.
Yeah.
Right now it's not landing. Can I help?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, by the way, is a great example. It is great to think about from our experience as audiences. One of the ways that we know we are inside conditional communication is when we do have a sense of listening to this person and we can see that they're very committed and we can see that they're very clear even, but we have this sense of this is not the whole story here. There's something being held back, or there's something in the background, or there's some sort of bullshit going on, or there's some different agendas not being cleared up, and that's happening in our political leadership at both sides of the Atlantic. So what would I advise? If I was advising somebody who wanted to become a more effective communicator through unconditional communication, the first element I'd talk about is intentionality. Intentionality. Being more 10%, 15% more conscious of what you're about to say and how it might land with the people you're actually talking to. The words that I'm about to say, we talk about sticks and stones don't break my, won't break my bones. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words won't hurt me. That's just not true anymore. We're hearing words being spoken that create visceral reactions in people. And truly great leaders, I think, who tap into the collective of communities and businesses, this, that, the other, will be more intentional. Before they speak, they will think about what they are saying. They will choose if they could say this or they could say this. What's going to be the most effective thing in terms of moving this whole thing forward? There was a fabulous example on YouTube, on TV the other day of Trudeau, who was asked, to make a comment on President Trump, and just paused.
21 seconds, right?
It felt.
But see, and here's I think the challenge, right? Just not to digress, but or get distracted. But when it comes to intentionality,
yes,
I have an old college friend of mine who is super phenomenal leader and who is a dear friend and also support mechanism for Drew Brees, the American football player. And I haven't even actually watched all the stuff. But Drew Brees came out yesterday and made a comment, or at least there's a comment, and I haven't watched a full interview, so I can't speak to it. But as an example, Drew Brees came out and made a comment about, I will never support anyone who's disrespecting the flag.
Mm-hmm.
And that has now caused a crap storm, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Because, technically was that being said in a way where kneeling in front of a football game or in front of a basketball game is disrespecting the flag, and if so, then here comes the again the race in antagonism again. Oh, I have this one athlete who has done a ton in the community of New Orleans for all kinds of people.
Yeah,
and that track record shows that. But who makes a comment that whether it's pulled out of context or not, or as a clickbait headline, people have misinterpreted his intention.
Yes.
And or maybe not misinterpreted. Yeah. Maybe they just have a different interpretation of his intention.
Yes.
And so now it's out in the wild and it gets a life of its own, right? Yeah. So intentionality, it starts there, but in today's world of just hyper ADD, hashtags flipping up at us, clickbait headlines, an advertising model on the internet that essentially, just compounds our own bias with malicious denial of service attacks against our cognition, and the algorithms and all this stuff. Is it even possible to have intention? I mean, you're always going to say something, even with the right intent, that a word is going to be charged. Certainly, certain words are more charged than others, but what's next? Well, because intentionality matters.
Yeah, and look, I mean, so in the research for my book, I found some data that finds that apparently, on average, each of us will speak 14,000 words a day. That's a heck of a lot of words.
I might be in like the 28,000 word category, but that's all right. I'm an overachiever.
I'm glad you said that, not me, Chris. But no, that's a lot of words, and a lot of those words come out because it feels good to get them out and get them said, and this lines with what I mean to say, and that's where you get the Drew Brees comments coming out. But with 10% more, wherever he was, whatever it was, an interview, whatever. There is that. Not one of the words that is coming out of my mouth today has to be said. But there's not a machine driving these words. Yeah. Even when people ask me questions, I can Trudeau it. Say that's a great question. Let me because this is important. What I'm about to say now is important because I'm Drew Brees, and a lot of people listen to what I say. And that thing that you are talking about is a really critical and sensitive topic at the moment. So give me a minute. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. We have created a world where speed is almost always supposed to be good, including in communication. No pauses, please. When in our essence, we know one of the qualities of a great conversation is being able to pause and think together and not rush. So the book, in my book, I deliberately say, it's almost a cliche to say it, that change starts with you, but this is genuinely a book about it starting with you. Because the outside world has been constructed around conditional communication and now punishes people for saying words that they didn't really mean or didn't think about this, that, the other.
Or puts words in people's mouth. I mean, the caveat that is I think what we're drawing a line on is that we live in a world of conditional communication. We live in a system that actually nourishes it and nurtures that.
Yep.
And an example of that is, on one case, we have Drew Brees saying something that he probably meant with all the right intentions, but that whether he should have paused or not came out and caused probably an impact he was not looking to have.
That's right.
Not just on him, but in the market, right? To his black friends, to his all those things, right?
Yeah.
So I think a thinking person could realize whatever the impact was that wasn't his intention was probably not intentional. Nonetheless, it doesn't excuse the fact of I could have paused, right? Assuming, because it wasn't an interview format from my understanding.
Right.
But now you take Trudeau, and I didn't see that either. But all I did see was a headline on CNBC, and the headline was Trudeau pauses for 21 seconds when asked about Trump. So in other words, the conditional implication is Trudeau hates Trump or whatever, right? Or Trudeau disagrees with whatever. Yeah. And that's the implication. That doesn't mean that's even what Trudeau was thinking or what he said.
Yes.
So this whole notion that, we can be in control of all of it is false anyway. But what we can do is we can do a Trudeau and pause. We can do what you said. That's a really important question. That's a tough one. Give me a second. At least then, if I say something like, what Drew Brees said, maybe because I paused, there's enough time there to say, well, you know what? Like, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here because he kind of got off guard. He tried to figure out how he wanted to say what he was communicating, and and so maybe I can see it through his eyes. So what's the second part? Because I think the second part is kind of where we start to get to the empathy side of things, right? With this unconditional side. So it starts with intentionality, but then we get to this we conversation, right? Or well, you start to get to me, like, where am I?
Yeah, that's right. And well, actually, there's a stage before that, which is, as well, when I am saying what I am about to say, the question I would coach my leaders on is, where am I coming from when I say that?
Where are you coming from?
Where am I coming from? Am I coming from a place of curiosity, let's say love, or am I coming from a place of scarcity, anxiety, fear, wanting to punish, wanting to dominate, this, that, the other? And we know what that sounds like every day. Somebody who wants to dominate with their language, So, and again,
what if as the leader, so give me an example. What if as the leader, you're coming from a place of your own processing your own pain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I think a lot of leaders are.
Yeah.
And I would give, in that case, again, not to pick on this you case, but, I would imagine that anyone who's speaking out, whether it's a celebrity or whatever, about this stuff, knows that they're being looked at with every fine-tooth comb, knows that the Antifas of the world are out there trying to pick it apart and spin it to the negative because they have a reason. It's like they have a reason to try and fuel riots when other people are peacefully protesting, right? So no matter what someone of a position of influence or power is looking at, they know they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. But in this case, if they choose that they cannot stay silent, which many have done, and then they start to go, where am I coming from? How would they, if they're coming from a place of their own anger, they're coming from a place of their own, I thought Kareem Abdul-Jabbar the other day, I didn't read the entire thing, but I saw clips of it, and obviously that takes guts, right? And that's kind of coming from this place of, I'm hurt, I'm angry, I feel, and yet realizing that you are a voice maybe that others can be inspired by, or others can draw hope from, or others can, so
when you're pointing to some of the behaviors here, Chris, the thing is, this where am I coming from is not some sort of let me get into the right possible state and let me get in touch with all my best strengths. It's actually naming it. What I'm about to say, I will be honest, right now, I'm hurt and I'm angry. And so some of the stuff you're about to hear might sound like that. But I'm committed to more than that in this conversation. I'm committed to you naming how you're feeling about the situation right now. And then out of that, once we've got beyond that, then we can say, okay, so what can you and I do about this? What can you and I right now, over the next 24 hours, do to help this enormous, big, wicked problem? Because it's always going to start with people like you and I deciding to do something together.
I think the greatest example of this, and whether it was natural or whether it was just, again, understanding how to communicate, was Killer Mike. I don't know if you saw the interview.
I love that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if we looked at your framework, I could literally break down his talk.
Yes.
And within the first 2 minutes, he did exactly what you just did. He said, where I'm coming from, I'm pissed.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I'm angry.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here.
Yes.
Like those were words that he used. And the minute he did that, it was like, okay, wait, here's a person who knows that they have to say something. They have to be in the front of the room.
Yes.
They are a leader. People that follow him, that trust him, are looking for his thoughts. And there is no time because stuff's burning.
Yep.
So if we wait 2, 3, 4 days or go put our head in the sand, that's not good. So he comes out and his intention, right, was, I want to help. I want to make this not as bad. Yep. But where he was coming from was, I get it. I'm pissed. I'm tired. I'm hurt. I'm sad.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And by doing that, immediately diffused and allowed everyone, regardless of where they were coming from, people that were in the midst of it and maybe did understand or maybe didn't realize how bad this whole thing was.
That's right.
Institutionally, could say, okay, wait a minute. I don't know why this guy's name's Killer Mike. He sure seems like level Mike right now.
Exactly right. Yeah. And what does that wake up in me about how I might speak into this conversation as well? I might be courageous enough to actually name these things, which I don't know what to do with, but it feels better when they come out from a place of what can we do about these things together, as opposed to I'm just going to dump on you, which is just not helpful. Yeah. But yeah, this is it. I mean, you mentioned empathy earlier on, Chris, and I think one of the gifts that conscious, aware leaders will have from this whole COVID thing is we've on this planet have been through a pretty much shared experience. The detail is going to be different for different people in different cities and this, that, the other. But I wrote about this in an essay on LinkedIn just the other week. I realized in the end of March, I was sitting here in my living room in Loveland, Colorado, and I didn't have to guess. I wonder what somebody in South Africa is thinking right now, or I wonder what somebody in Sweden is thinking right now. I wonder what somebody in South, they're probably thinking exactly what I'm thinking, which is, am I going to get this thing? If I get it, am I going to be one of those who almost dies or doesn't even realize? What's my future like that I was planning? How are my kids going to be? What's happening to their education? Where's the grief in all of this going? And that is, there aren't many experiences we've had as a human race where that's been so. So this idea of, we're separate, we don't know each other. We know the themes of life, and we've been put through the themes of life: heroism, overcoming great odds, facing up to mortality, all those things, that we usually like to watch on the movie screen, but here it came into our lives all around the planet. Yeah.
Well, and we're being confronted, first with COVID on a global scale in a way that never in the last several lifetimes, at least, has happened. Yeah. We're being confronted with our own responsibility.
Yes. Yes.
And where we may have, without realizing it, maybe even without intending it, where we have kind of discarded that responsibility on these key things, right? The not apathy in the sense of aware apathy, but almost like, wow, until COVID happened and broke all of our daily habits at scale, where this common thing, we didn't even have the chance to look at these other things that we've kind of maybe not wanted to ignore, but that we weren't responsible for as Chris or as David, because they didn't happen in our city, or they didn't happen to our family or our friend, and so it's almost as if, and who knows what this next thing will be. Maybe it'll be a hurricane. There's one bearing down right now. You want to talk about perfect storms. It's like you have a global pandemic and a shutdown economy. Then you have a long overdue bubbling up of something terribly flawed with our, wonderful country, which is the politics and the politicization, or I can't even say that word, of things that are institutionally just inequitable.
Yes.
And we have that bubbling up, and now we have that tinderbox, that's ignited. And, we're now all at least thinking and pausing and starting to recapture, well, I guess I need, and I also, maybe I want to be more responsible for these outcomes. I've got to engage, but now I have to learn how, because I haven't done that in this kind of way. That's where the communication piece comes in. So talk about this as we wind up here in the last several minutes. Talk about what nothing in the way means. That's the third element.
Yeah, nothing in the way means basically presence, being present to each other, being present to myself and what's going on inside me, so that I might, like Killer Mike, name my emotions if I think that's going to be useful for moving us on. And it's certainly being present to you. Particularly in times of crisis and difficulty, we have lost, I think, as a society, the value of just being there with each other. A lot of my clients, before all this kicked off, would complain about being in meetings, and most of the people that were thinking about the previous meeting or already looking forward to the next meeting weren't actually present. And if you're not actually present, you don't have all of your capacities for curiosity and learning and inspiration and whatever, and knowledge online. They're all clustered under this busyness of this, that, and the other. So just one of the greatest gifts we can give to each other is to be really present. I'm on this call with Chris, and there's nothing else going on in my world at the moment apart from being in this conversation with Chris and being there for the people who might be listening to this.
And that's the segue, right? So as if I'm present, then I can be focused on what I'm in service of. That's the fourth element. Right?
And the fourth element is, we've been conditioned to think that success and happiness comes when I get my needs met. Actually, a lot of the psychology and a lot of the brain science and a lot of the sort of ethics stuff says our deepest sense of happiness and peace comes from helping others. So how can this communication, how can I start, before I even open my mouth or even get my presentation together, how can I make sure that this place is coming to be helpful to my potential client or my neighbor or this, that, the other? Yeah, how can I help that person get their needs met as a way of them opening up to me and then us building something together? And then the final one is an expansion of that, which is if we've got to this place where we truly, because we've served each other's needs, we're truly in a place where we trust each other, then the biggest question, my mentor Peter Block taught me this, the most powerful question you can ask any group of people is, what do we want to create together? What, it has a direction to it, is a thing that we're going to create, or a condition we haven't got yet. Yeah. Do we want to? We're choosing to do this by our own volition. We're not being forced to. Yeah. Create. It's bubbling up from our sense of being creators in this planet, as opposed to victims or passengers. And together, because none of us can do anything on our own in this world of any great value. It's always going to be based on relationship. So what do we want to create together is the fifth element.
It's so interesting that I can't remember if it was in Colorado, your home state, or if it was in Seattle the other day. But there was, it may have been in Colorado, but there was a peaceful group that was probably in the 1,000-ish range, pretty large. And I saw on the news that the one quote unquote, I guess, leader, or the one they were interviewing anyway, one of the people that was organizing that group specifically, all they wanted to do was sit down with the representatives, right? The Congress of, state Congress, or the governor or the mayor, and all they did was just sit with us, have a conversation with us, right? Yeah. And I'm not sure if they got that or not, but I think it's kind of, again, back to this, if you're avoiding that, right? If you're avoiding that as a leader right now, and I'm not judging any leaders that are in this space in general, because I don't know all I know is a handful of the ones that I've seen, maybe wish they could take a couple plays back, right? But yeah. But there's a lot of leaders that are doing things probably very right, and even deploying some of these things. But I just can't imagine if I had this framework and I was, that mayor, right? I'm sitting down and I'm going, okay, what's my intention for being here? My intention for being here is I want to help. This is our city. This is our state. So that's my intention. Where am I coming from? I'm pissed too. I'm pissed because I want to protect people's rights under the Constitution to protest and to do that. I also don't want the city and people to be harmed because of an element of this that is taking things in a direction of looting or rioting. And I've got to figure that out. And I've also got to have the backs of my police force, because I'm relying on them, as well as the National Guard. And at the same time, I'm pissed that a good amount of them for years and decades have institutionally done this so badly that none of us can trust them. Yeah. So welcome to my day. Yes. Your day sucks too.
Yes.
Tell me about your day.
And as well, right? And also, I don't want my pissedness lasting forever.
Yeah, I don't want to piss. I don't want to be pissed off, and I don't want you to be pissed off. So, right. So I'm coming in from that place, and I'm here because I want to help. But just understand where I'm coming in. Now, tell me where you're coming in from. Yeah, that's right. And then, okay, so now I'm present to you because nothing's in my way. I'm here. I'm listening to you, Mr. or Mrs. Right, protester or group. Nothing's in the way of that. Yeah. Boom. Now they feel heard. Okay. So in the service of our community, in the service of humanity, which every single one of us, down to a person, regardless of color, saw that murder and went, that can't ever happen again.
Yes.
So we share that. So in the service of not having a human existence that can be marred or scarred by that kind of thing, what do we want to create together?
Yeah. Yeah. What do we want to create together, and what should we do about that? Because this is not communication just so we can be in talking shops together and getting stuff off our chest. It's going beyond that so that then we can get into action together. It's not what do we want them to stop doing or them to start doing. It's what can we do? And that comes back to the central argument in the book is, eventually society, I hope, will change. We won't have the sort of media fest that we have at the moment that you started this conversation with. But where we start is we start in our home. And then we start in our neighborhood, and we start in our school district, and we start in this town, and we ripple out from there. Yeah.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure to see your face and hear your wisdom, and I hope we're going to tag every governor we can and every leader we can in this, and I hope they look you up. I hope you connect with them on LinkedIn, and I acknowledge you for your work. I think this framework is simple but beautifully brilliant. And again, that use case we just came up with, I think it's super relevant. So I will be retweeting, resharing, revamping anything that you put out, sir. I know on behalf of Smarter B2B, we're glad to have you here. So thanks for joining us. David Firth, everybody.
Thank you,
Take
Chris.
care. Have a great rest of your day, and have